Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host, Fraser Ford, and returning to the show, we have Inside F2 editors Hannah Bruffolk and LA Wilshaw, and we also have GP Grandstands Jim Kimberley. Coming up on today's show, we'll be reviewing all of the action from a thrilling weekend in Monaco. Who were the winners and the losers in the championship this weekend? We discuss all. And finally, we'll be getting the panel to answer all of your questions off the back of this weekend. So much to discuss, so let's get stuck into it straight away. LA, it's great to have you back with us. Some incredible action across the weekend. We waited 8 weeks for Formula 2 to be back on our screens, and how good was it to have Formula 2 back, and also to be back in Monaco for the first time after 2 years.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. The Monaco Grand Prix, whether it be Formula 1, Formula 2, is my favourite race of the season. And it's not necessarily for the obvious reasons of, like loads of overtaking or lots of action on track. It's just the event itself. It's the enormity of it. And it's not just exciting because it's back. It was exciting because we had to wait 8 weeks, and it kind of felt like, it feels like now the season started. I don't know how the rest of you feel, because there now feels like there can be some momentum to it. The next race is only a couple of weeks away. And of course, Monaco didn't disappoint for Formula 2. Lots of action on track, bit of overtaking, a couple of crashes, a couple of pit stop nightmares, and I'm sure we'll all get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Quarter of the way through the season already. That is it's crazy, isn't it? But obviously, Hannah, we had the discussion on the preview show about can sometimes Monaco be a little bit boring, but it didn't disappoint this weekend in Formula 2, did it?
Absolutely not. I think my point still stands is that Monaco for Formula 1 is boring. It doesn't have the overtaking capabilities that other tracks have. But for Formula 2, where the cars are smaller and lighter, and with possible Formula 1 careers on the line, the drivers were just in fine form. I have to admit, some of those overtakes, like Dan Tickton on Oscar Piastri heading out the tunnel, it had my heart in my throat. I didn't think it was going to work. I think overall, the whole weekend was just some of the best driving that we'd seen. And a couple of drivers that surprised me. I think a couple came out of the shells a bit more and hopefully started to have a bit of a boost to their season, which is good to see. And it also showed how tight the championship is, especially between the returning drivers compared to the rookies, because I don't think at the moment there's at least probably 8 to 9 drivers you could say have a realistic shot at the championship. And overall, Monaco was just some of the best. It was helped by different circumstances. For example, the rain for Sprint Race 2. I think that did help a lot. But I've got to take hats off to Monaco. Formula 2, if Formula 1 doesn't go there, Formula 2 definitely should.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It was epic, wasn't it? And Jim, who stood out for you this weekend? Who were the drivers that had a really good weekend?
You know what? Because a lot of people are going to go straight to Pourchaire, and rightly so. He was on another level, wasn't he? I couldn't believe he was the youngest winner now in Formula 2. And yeah, everyone's going to talk about how good he was, and they should. But Ralph Boschung, for me, he has had this magic comeback. And then he was just solid the entire time. I was devastated that he didn't get a podium. It would have been the proper way to send off that great weekend. But he'll be delighted. He's getting his best F2 finishes at Monaco repeatedly. He was so there all of the time. And not his biggest fan because from this issue about young drivers coming through, but hats off to Nissany, made the podium for the first time as well, so you can't ignore that. But yeah, Pourchaire's the standout driver. He really arrived in Formula 2 this weekend, I thought.
Yeah, we're going to come on to that a bit later, but it's definitely a good weekend for those drivers. So let's take a look at the championship standings after round 2. Guan Yu Zhou leads the way after a strong weekend, with Oscar Piastri not too far behind. Théo Pourchaire, as we've just said, propels himself up 4 places in the championship to P3, with Dan Ticktum and Liam Lawson rounding up the top 5. And the team standings, UNI Virtuosi are top of the leaderboard after round 2, after accumulating a big point haul this weekend. They're followed by Prema, who are trailed by Carlin, ART and Hightech, who all of those are separated by just 9 points. If you want to see the full standings, you can head over to www.insidef2.com. Only one place to start though, Hannah, and that's with our championship leader, Guan Yu Zhou. He extended his championship lead this weekend from 11 points after Bahrain to 16 points. A solid weekend, a consistent weekend, obviously winning sprint race 1, a P5 in the feature race as well. Is that consistency what separated him from the rest of the field so far?
I would say so. I think kind of a mix of consistency, skill, or his talent, and a little bit of luck for some of his championship rivals. I think overall from the weekend, qualifying 10th wasn't bad. I don't necessarily think, I think he could have done a bit better in qualifying, but overall, given the tight margins in Monaco, at least he was in the top 10, and it obviously helped heading into the sprint race 1. Taking that victory, I think, was important for him to show that what happened in Bahrain wasn't a fluke, and it gives him that level of momentum. He's now shown multiple race winner in Formula 2, championship leader. I think some people maybe underplay how much of an impact that does have, because you're going to have that level of confidence in yourself and your abilities. And I think with the weekend, obviously didn't do as well in the second sprint race. I was surprised you and I Virtuosi took the risk on the strategy going on to slicks in the wet conditions. I think I was excited to see it because it was a gamble, and normally teams play it safe. And I was disappointed that it didn't work out, because I think if it had worked out, you would have been in the points playing positions probably. And then obviously in the second sprint, in the feature race, finishing 5th, I think that consistency has helped him. I think it does maybe show, especially for him, the level of experience he has in the series. 3rd season there, he knows those cars now like the back of his hand compared to, say, the rookies. It was helped by the fact that obviously Lawson got disqualified from his victory in sprint race 2. But overall, you can't kind of knock him, and you've got to take hats off to him, because you can be, look at last year, Callum Ilott was the fastest guy on track most of the time. But because he was unlucky and didn't have the consistency, he ultimately lost the championship to Mick Schumacher. So consistency is key in Formula 2, and it proves that you can't have a bad weekend or a bad day under the new format.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you, Jim. It is, Mick Schumacher won the championship last year, and it was that consistency that did win him the title. How important is consistency in Formula 2?
It's the most important thing there is. I'd say that you can have, like, say, this Porsche again, you could have a stellar weekend like this and have a couple of those all season, but you could end up finishing 5th in the championship. It really doesn't matter. Zhou was nowhere, thanks to Virtuosi's, as Hannah alluded to, Virtuosi's gamble, which I want to actually give them a round of applause for it, because my opinion was they weren't going to be scoring points as the race stood. It's Monaco. So if the drying track was dry enough for slicks, they would have been looking like absolute kings, wouldn't they, of getting away and maybe stealing some points from nowhere. And their strategy call in the feature race was absolutely bang on. You could see Zhou was just waiting for the safety car. He was on how many laps had those tyres done? And it was virtual safety car, virtual safety car, virtual safety car. If the safety car came out, he could have got a podium as well. And him just not having any mistakes at Monaco. We've seen Schwartzman, who should be right up there fighting for the championship. Zhou kept it out of the wall, kept it consistent, and is rewarded with a victory and a good haul of points in the feature race. At Monaco, getting points from 10th place, unlikely for the sprint race too. But yeah, that consistency could really keep him steady. Lundgaard as well, very quick. And then he's had misfortune, but that lack of consistency could really hurt him come the season's end.
Yeah, a difficult weekend for Christian Lundgaard again. But LA, let's talk about our youngest ever Formula 2 winner, Théo Pourchaire. Anyone that watches the junior categories know how good this guy is, but to do it in Formula 2 at Monaco, in front of the Formula 1 paddock at 17 years old in his second round of Formula 2. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Has a star been born this weekend?
Yeah, I kind of think all these guys are stars. And it's not by fluke. They are brought through these feeder series with this in mind, to make them stars. They're very much trained and groomed, to be this great. And he's just proof of the pudding that what's been happening in the last few years in the feeder series is working perfectly. So yeah, he's a star, but they're all stars in my eyes. And you're right about, you know, his other successes. I mean, he was the champion in Formula 4 in 2019, and it was an incredibly close, tight battle last year for him in Formula 3. You know, he only finished 3 points behind the championship winner, Piastri, and it was obviously between three of them, you know, with Sargent just 1 point behind him. So, you know, he finished second there. So when we're talking about consistency, he is consistently up there, and he knows how to win a championship or to at least come second. And already, yes, you know, he had a rough kind of first race weekend. He did have that retirement, then the 6th and the 8th place. And this weekend, he's had the 7th and the 4th, but then the 1st place. And if you look at the others, you can kind of say, well, Piastri's, you know, had better results, or, you know, whoever's had better results. But to be on home soil, I'm sure he felt a home advantage, and that does benefit, you know, it benefits people in other sports having a home advantage. And I'm sure that he felt very much at home, a wonderful atmosphere that Monaco does create, you know, and those stands and those fans, few of them as there were, they weren't just there for Charles Leclerc in Formula One. They were there for him. They had flags out for him.
That's a massive flag, wasn't it?
It was huge, yeah, and how wonderful must that have felt for him? And so, you know, and I think this will propel him forward very much so. You know, 17 years old, and he's making history, and that came across in the press conference afterwards. He was his whole aura. You know, he seemed such a wonderful young man, and very well spoken, very friendly, and you could just see the excitement just pouring out of him and the pure joy of what he'd just done. And I think sometimes the drivers can take a while to come down from a race win. And sometimes you can't necessarily sense what they're feeling, but you could absolutely sense his joy of that win during that conference afterwards. And it was a pleasure to have seen that.
Yeah, he was absolutely elated, wasn't he? Let's take a listen to his team radio message after the race.
Un très grand bravo, Théo. Ça fait fantastique. Bravo, bravo.
They came prepared. They came with the flag. How much of a following has he already got? And you've got a flag that big.
Jim at Luke Buckle 12 on Instagram has asked, has Théo Pourchaire catapulted himself into the title race?
Yeah, I'd say so. It was a commanding win, wasn't it? It was never under any doubt on that feature race. It shows the level of maturity for the youngest race winner in Formula 2, that he has the ability, there and again, half the field do, but he has the ability and arguably the car to mount a championship fight. The way that people went on about Pourchaire in the run-up to this season, thinking, okay, it's his rookie year, this might be a building year. There's Piastri as well, but half of these rookies that have come up, they're all in a championship fight, I think. Pourchaire definitely is, Piastri probably is, but from the Pourchaire side of things, he's probably got a really strong shot. If, yeah, I'd say even a top 3 finish, I say even like it's not a big deal, but a top 3 finish in your rookie year in Formula 2, he's got a real chance of looking at a Formula 1 seat with that Sauber link. That Giovinazzi's got points at Monaco, well done. He's looking stronger, but I don't know where he goes. And Raikkonen's got to be thinking about retirement at this point. So what's better way than to say goodbye to the oldest driver than to bring in the youngest driver? It would be amazing to see. So very much in the championship fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So let's talk about Oscar Piastri, Hannah. Another good weekend, another consistent weekend again. How important is that consistency going to be?
I think it's going to be absolutely crucial. For me, Oscar might not have been the quickest on track, might not have been the most jazzy or show-stopping, but he was the driver I was most impressed by the whole weekend. I think with Formula 2, as Jim said, you cannot underestimate how important that consistency is. You could have done brilliant weekends and then your championship goes sour by a couple of mistakes. Look at Robert Schwartzman last year. The double header at Silverstone ruined his campaign. But for me, Piastri Monaco was just, I think it highlighted for me why the rookies this year are so good. Even though they don't have that experience, they have that, I don't want to say common sense, but that kind of knowledge and understanding of You don't win a campaign by being the quickest, you win a campaign by being the smartest. He maybe, for example, in the battle with Lawson during Sprint Race 2, the fact that he defended it fairly, he could have maybe defended it a bit more, but likely it was that would have probably caused an incident and ruined both their races. He had the level of knowledge and intelligence and the maturity to play it, not say safe, but play it sensible and get those whole points. Like, of all the drivers, qualified in third, finished 8th in Sprint Race 1, 2nd in Sprint Race 2, and 2nd again in the feature race. Few drivers can say they've come out of any of the weekends with a similar level of points. 2 podiums in Monaco. Most drivers want 1. He's got 2, so it's not half a bad day in the office. And I would say it, for me, highlights why I'd say Théo Pourchaire and Oscar Piastri have to be 2 of the main title contenders this year. Alongside Liam Lawson, I think there's 4 rookies in the top 10. And it does maybe prove to me how the rookies this year don't seem to be having as much difficulty getting to grips with the car as, say, they've had in previous years. They all seem to be flying, and I think it's great to see. And overall, it proves that even though a lot of the guys say, oh, I'm not thinking of the championship just yet, it's too early, we're third of the way through the season. Oscar has got to be thinking of the championship by this point, and I think if he carries on like this, he will be a serious title contender.
Yeah, Can I just jump in? Sorry, Fraser. Can I just jump in and just back what you say up, Hannah? Because not only was Piastri staying out of the walls, he was fighting wheel to wheel throughout the entire weekend and keeping out of the wall. I was so impressed with that I might want to go back and say Piastri was a driver that impressed, because he wasn't the quickest, but he was battling against Ticktum, he was battling against Lawson, like you say, and despite jumping the chicane to stay away from the barriers, he kept his nose clean, literally, and finished the races, which is that consistency that you mentioned, Hannah. Yeah, I really want to just exemplify how good he was this weekend for thinking long term. We saw Schwartzman, his teammate, first lap, first race, weekend screwed up from that. Whereas Piastri, masterclass.
He's showing a real level of. Sorry, LA, go on.
But that's one of the most impressive things about Pourchaire as well. I think just because he was leading doesn't mean that was an easy race for him by any means. I remember a few years ago Lewis Hamilton describing the cat and the mouse situation, and he actually said he always preferred to be the cat chasing the mouse rather than the mouse being chased by a cat. And if you can imagine Pourchaire in that race, he was the mouse being chased by all the cats. And Schwartzman in the opening laps, and then you had Ticktum later on in the race, absolutely pushing him. And he actually described the beginning of that race as well as throughout the race as being very intense, and he was terrified, he was frightened on the start, because he knows what Monaco's like, and he was very aware of everyone obviously trying to get past him off the line, and that fear that was in him. He obviously must have honed that fear, and it was perhaps with him throughout the race, and he managed to get through that race unscathed, kept his nose clean, as you've just said, Jim, for another driver, and won that race. And to me, that was actually what was the most impressive aspect of him winning that race, not just because he won a race at Monaco, but because of how he won it and the reason why he won it. And although Baku is a very, very different track, it's still a street circuit, but it's a very different kind of street circuit. The barrier aspect of it still being a street circuit, I actually feel that would benefit him greatly because of that entire experience that he went through.
The level of maturity of these rookies is simply incredible, isn't it, for them being at such a young age. But if, for example, Jim, if Oscar Piastri does go and win the championship this season, is he giving Alpine a headache? Obviously, Fernando Alonso tied down to a 2-year contract. Esteban Ocon really impressing at the moment. You've got Pierre Gasly sniffing around for that seat. If you then throw in Oscar Piastri into that mix where he's won the Formula 3 championship at the first time of asking. He's then come into Formula 2 and won the Formula 2 championship at the first time of asking. Can Alpine ignore him if he does that?
I don't know I don't know who I'd rather be in this sort of situation with these drivers coming through with Red Bull, with some of the amount of options that they've got, or Alpine. But Alpine have got a real problem away from Piastri. So Piastri, if he wins in his first season, how can you not promote him? But if he doesn't, Joe is in for a tremendous chance of winning, and how can you not promote him? And on the bad side of things, if Joe wins, then you've got this huge market for Renault of China being the first Chinese driver. And I spoke to Joe recently, and I hated having to bring it up because he's every interview, your first Chinese driver in Formula One, if you make it there. But that's a huge problem. And Alpine just don't have enough, Formula One, but Alpine in particular, don't have enough cars for these drivers to come through. And maybe the Alonso problem could figure itself out if he has more races like he had today when we're filming this on race day, because he was nowhere. And I don't know if he'd want to actually stick around to have Ocon embarrass him week after week. It's not been the heroic return that he expected. 2 years out of the sport, I don't want to say I expected it, but if he came back with Alpine, who were midfield at best, and then came back and was challenging for points and outdoing Ocon, who, let's not forget, had a mediocre season last year, I would have been thinking, oh, well, that Alonso is good. I know he's good. He's won 2 championships. He's won Le Mans. He's going to be going for the Triple Crown. He probably will get it when he gets the right opportunity. I just don't know why he's back. So, yeah, it creates a problem. Gasly sniffing for the seat, that's a good story as well. Lundgaard, let's not forget, he's got possibilities. It's still early in the season, over a quarter way through, but Lundgaard's had awful luck, but that sort of stuff tends to work its way out throughout the season. Deruva may disagree based off last year, but yeah, Alpine are looking like such a strong academy right now, and yeah, it's a huge problem for them. Alonso at the moment, early in the season, could be the one that we saw what happened to Perez with a contract. Maybe he could be on his way out, which would be an awful way to return to F1.
That would be controversial, wouldn't it? Fernando Alonso, 2-time champion, being booted from an Alpine seat to be replaced by a Formula 2 driver. And another guy that's potentially, looking at a shot in Formula 1 next season, Dan Ticktum, obviously the eventual race winner in race 2. He doesn't do boring weekends, does he, Hannah? It would have been a brilliant weekend for him. Had he not parked his car down at Raskas in the feature race, it would have been a brilliant weekend for him. How disappointed will he be? And how do you think he'll reflect on the weekend? I
think he's probably very gutted with what happened. I think overall is his position in the championship. He's 4th at the moment, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the speed or the ability he's shown, especially around Monaco. It's ironic because he's actually, despite it only being his 2nd season in Formula 2, he's actually probably one of the veterans of the Monaco circuit. Same with Oscar Piastri. I think Oscar was the only driver who had made an appearance at Monaco in the junior formulas in the wet conditions, was Dan had been there when he had been in Renault Eurocup. And I think overall the weekend was so promising. After speaking to him in the press conference, I genuinely thought he could possibly even challenge for a win in the feature race if he gets a brilliant start off the line. I think qualified well, finished 6th in the first race, sprint race 2. The man was on a mission. I think the fact that he got a brilliant start off the line, there was a discussion about whether the side, the Piastri and Ticktum one, had the drier line, but apparently, according to a lot of the drivers, it actually didn't make that much difference, but he got a blinding start, made sure to keep Pushare behind him, and then his move on Oscar. If Formula 2 did awards for best overtakes of the season, I would genuinely be nominating that, because I just thought it was one of the moments of it all could have ended in tears. He'd gone on the wet line. If he'd have braked a little bit too late, they'd have both ended up in the wall, and it would have been probably a weekend to forget for him. I think looking back overall, you'll probably see the positives. I think he'll take the fact that he obviously has the pace and street circuits suit his driving style well. He's a 2-time Macau Grand Prix winner, I don't think. Anyone could underestimate him and street circuits are a match made in heaven, but in heading into Baku, that'll only give him more confidence. I think the thing will frustrate him is that move on Oscar Piastri into the Raskas. Maybe there's an argument whether he should or shouldn't have done it. I think that with hindsight, you could turn around and say he shouldn't have done it. He should have just accepted the position he was in, taken the points, and maybe on a consistent.
It's a racing instinct, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's my one thing when people have criticised him. A lot of people blasted him on social media for it, and I turned around and said, if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have thought he was a racing driver. You're going to go for that move. You're going to be risky. And it proves that he has the racer's instinct. And overall, I would say, yeah, it's not ideal with what happened. The fact that he was visibly despondent after that race, actually kind of broke my heart a little bit, because you could just tell, I think, of all of the drivers on the grid, they've all got pressure wanting to get into Formula 1. But Ticktum knows he has probably a lot more pressure on him than most do. And I think he'll be annoyed that it happened, but I think overall he can't dwell on it for too long. They've got 2 weeks. If he is still thinking about Monaco and Baku, it's going to ruin that weekend. So I think you look back on it, take what he needs to learn from it, and kind of just put it to bed. I think overall is he'll be back on fine form in Baku, and I can't wait to see it.
I find it funny that you're talking about disappointment when he got the win after irregularities, but I completely understand what you're saying. But what a situation to be in, that he will be disappointed because of how many more points he could have got away with, because he was looking at 2 podiums, possibly 2 wins. Ticktum really impressed me this weekend. I know, LA, that you're a big fan of his as well. But for me, I've always had that bad boy image, and he's quick, but he needs to calm down. His radio completely saying that was my fault. Sorry, guys. My respect levels went up quite a lot from that on that feature race.
Ticktum tries to roll round the outside. Piastri breaks later and shepherds him all the way to the wall.
Stalls, mate. I'm out. I'm really, really sorry. I'm really sorry, guys.
Yeah, but I was gutted as well for him. We're very much gutted. Yeah.
And Robert Schwartzman, he had a difficult start to the weekend, hitting the wall in sprint race 1. Not the start that I don't think he was hoping for. He obviously carved his way through the field in sprint race 2 to earn himself 2 fastest lap points, actually. And then he was unlucky in the feature race to have a slow pit stop, which robbed him of a second place, really. What did you make of his performance in Monaco, LA?
I thought it was great. Just sort of reiterating what Hannah just said previously about him, is that yes, he hit the wall, and ended up 10th in the sprint race 2, managing to just grab that 10th in the last few moments, and got the fastest lap. And also, the pit stop, wasn't that painful? And I'm sure it was painful for him. But, that's one of those things. It's the preparation for Formula 1 at the end of the day. And look at what happened to Valtteri Bottas today. It's the same thing. So he needs that preparation. He needs that psychological prep for those kind of things to happen. And being with the Prema team, he's with one of the best teams, in Formula 2, that can provide him with everything that he needs to get himself into Formula 1. And he impressed me very much this weekend, regardless of the wall, regardless of the P10, to have been in that pit stop and to be sitting there waiting for what must have felt like an hour, and then to come out on track and to end up finishing 4th. Like, where did that come from? How can you not be impressed by him?
Definitely a strong end to that feature race. And Hannah, Liam Lawson, we've spoken about some good moves, but what a move past Oscar Piastri for the lead in the sprint race 2.
Absolutely. I think that move I feel like with the whole weekend, there were just so many great moves, and Liam's was brilliant. I think overall, the fact that he was willing to go for that risk, obviously in the slightly drying conditions. Monaco is a pain to drive as it is, but trying to do it in the wet, I just think he must have had nerves of steel or something to go in to do that move. And I think the fact that initially when the moves didn't stick, but then he dived up the inside of Lascaux, I think Oscar was very good in that they gave each other enough room, because it quite easily could have gone the way that Ticktum's incident went the following race. The reason he got disqualified for using the incorrect throttle map, for me, it highlighted my issue with the race stewards. They allowed Deledda to race despite not being in the 107% rule. And we all know why that got brought is in the sport. But then with Lawson, what happened with the throttle map actually didn't give him an advantage. He had an incredibly poor start off the line. Was you look at the footage, and Ticktum nearly gets him at the start. You didn't clearly gain an advantage from it. It sucked because, to be honest, he deserved that win.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a point that you covered there, Hannah, that I wanted to pick up with you, Jim. Was disqualification a little bit harsh for, as Hannah's just said, for something that he didn't gain an advantage from? Would like a 5-second or a 10-second penalty have been, more appropriate?
Back in the olden days, you used to chop your hands off for stealing, and these days you get 6 months community service. I feel it's something equivalent to that, because there was no advantage. A 5 or 10-second penalty maybe is to keep with consistency in a rule book to give a penalty, but common sense would say, what was the benefit? He didn't benefit. It was to his detriment, maybe not directly to his detriment because he just had a poor start. He gained no advantage. And to take a victory away at Monaco, heartbreaking, wasn't it? It wasn't the way Tickton would want to win the race. Lawson, if he needed to get a penalty, the penalty shouldn't have been, okay, you're going to go from first down to last because we're going to disqualify you. And from things that I've read and a bit of research since, it suggests that these throttle map settings that they've got are a consistent problem with the current chassis that they've got or the engine that they've got, that they need it to prevent them stalling. And we see them how difficult they find it when they go into the runoff at Saint Devote and everywhere, that they get a bit too nervy to do put your foot down, spin it round, to do a 3 or 5 point turn instead because they're too nervous that the car could stall. So the problem for me is that's not a Lawson issue. They've got these throttle maps in there because the way the car is set up, completely outside the team's control, is problematic. And now he's been punished for it. And yeah, it's heartbreaking for him. It's not, I don't feel it's anything that he got an advantage from, in which case, if he cut a chicane, gained an advantage, didn't give the place back, yeah, throw the book at him. Don't throw the book at him for such a minor, trivial issue. Give him a 5-second penalty. If you're feeling really harsh, give him a drive-through. But a disqualification, that's because they didn't pick up it until after the race. It's really, really painful.
It's brutal, isn't it? Absolutely brutal. And those points could be costly come the end of the season. We'll wait and see. LA, we saw Roy Nissany on the podium for the first time in Formula 2. We also saw, and as Jim has already mentioned, Ralph Boschung have his best weekend in Formula 2 to date. They were straight out of the blocks in qualifying. Do you think the fact they had experience around Monaco in Formula 2 cars was beneficial for them? And did it almost make their weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. Any racetrack that a driver can race on and then they go back again another time is very beneficial. You know, even Pusher, the winner, will remember this next year and he'll have a great advantage, you know, over everybody. So yeah, Boschung 4th, a 5th and a 6th this weekend, which is incredibly impressive. And I agree with your comments a little bit earlier on him. And Nissany, yeah, P3, you know, in that first sprint race. What was it you said before, Hannah, about the smartest when we're talking about consistency or doing well? And Nissany has a new approach this year, it seems. You know, he's gained some inspiration from the Nadal and Djokovic tennis match, which he's spoken about a little bit this weekend, and he spoke about in the press conference. And you know, and he was looking at the long game for Monaco of the just trying to, you know, hold back and hold on and just do his drive and do his little bit. And he ends up with a P3. Of course, the sprint race 2, he retired, but then he P9 in the feature race. So I feel that kind of an approach, that kind of, he seems to be settled, and that's what can also slow and steady, you know, wins the race. Pardon the pun. And that's also what can maybe get the points in the bag. So when it does come to the end of the season, person with the most points is going to win.
Yeah, it takes him above Marcus Armstrong, his teammate in the championship. So I'm sure he'll be happy with that because Marcus is no pushover, let's say that.
Very
Jim,
unlucky though, Marcus, wasn't he? Very unlucky in the sprint race 2. That could have been a completely different result.
He was, yeah. He obviously, had that pole position that he didn't start the race for, and then an accident in the feature race, didn't he? So I'm sure it's a gutting weekend and a little bit of a disappointing weekend for him as well, isn't it? Jim, you joined us on our new feature on Twitter Spaces over the weekend. If you guys at home wanted to join us for those conversations on Twitter Spaces after the race, we'll be doing that again after Baku. You gave a shout out to the marshals. I mean, someone give those guys a pay rise. How quick were they this weekend? They did an incredible job.
They were so good. I was constantly in awe of it, and they didn't have any of their time to shine in the F1 race because for the first time in 11 odd years, no yellow flags, no safety cars. All the screw ups are the screwing on of a wheel for Bottas. It was just, yeah. Formula 2, the hardcore Formula 2 fans, we know those guys are getting cars off the track in under 90 seconds, and it was a phenomenal effort, and they deserve all the plaudits they get. We joked just on the pre-show about how bad the Monaco TV direction was. You cannot fault the Monaco marshals. They were so good from every single race. And I watched some of the Formula Regional race on Sunday, the second Formula Regional race. And just after the Porsches had a massive pile up going up Beau Rivage, then the Formula Regional races did with one of the cars flipping over. Those guys, they seem to be on overtime. I'm glad they got to have a bit of relaxation with the actual F1 race to watch it without having to do anything.
Hey, it was a day off for them, wasn't it? It was lovely, absolutely, or an afternoon off, definitely. Question time for our panel now. As always, we wanted to give you guys at home the opportunity to ask any questions that you may have through the weekend. So if you have any questions in the future, please get in contact. So our question from Ash Buckman on Instagram asked, who was your driver of the weekend and who do you think will be disappointed with their weekend? LA, we'll come to you for that one.
I think I'm going to still give it to Teo just because of the explanation I gave you before, about the pressure and about coping with that pressure at 17 years old. I mean, he did mention that I think he'd been karting since he was about 3, I'm sure he said at some point in the press conference. So, some of the lads only start karting at 7. So he does have a few years over them, even though he's only 17. But even so, what an impressive drive. I'm just very disappointed for Dan, and I'm sure Dan's going to be disappointed too. He just tried to do what he could with that advantage, and it's Monaco. Look what happens, and I can't be just as gutted as he is. I'm not him, and I'm not in that car, and I've not got a Formula One career ahead of me, but I'm very gutted.
I know this question wasn't asked at me, but I just want to also give a shout out going back to yours, LA, on a drive of the weekend, because I don't think any of us have mentioned him. Felipe Drugovich had a terrific weekend, and we've all skipped past him. I was just looking for some of our notes, and I was like, oh yeah, the other double podium finisher at Monaco, Felipe Drugovich. UNI Virtuosi saved themselves with the strategy in the feature race after doing the poor gamble in sprint race 2. Drugovich was actually unfortunate to out-qualify or be in the wrong qualifying group with Joe, because he could have got the win for sprint race 1 as well with the reverse grid. But yeah, he drove such a mega race, and the commentators didn't seem to pick up on it. But I was watching him fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap, fastest lap, and just closing the gap. He put in a mega performance in the feature race.
Yeah, definitely consistent, and it was a brilliant weekend from him, and maybe could be the weekend that throws him into championship contention as well. It gives him something to kick on with for the rest of the season. A quick word on our Formula 2 graduates and how they're doing in Formula 1. We've had Portugal, Spain and Monaco, obviously, since our last show, Monaco being today on the day we're recording. Hannah, what did you make of Yuki Tsunoda's performance over the last few races?
Yuki, honestly, I feel bad for him. But also I know it's all of the rookies, I think, are having a difficult time with things. Yuki's probably got a better position in the fact that his AlphaTauri car is clearly quite strong if you look at Pierre Gasly during the race, but he doesn't after his brilliant debut. I think, to be honest, having that brilliant of a debut shot him in the foot a bit. I think it was Ross Brawn was saying, oh, he's one of the best rookies we've seen in years. They've hyped him up. And the problem is that you are going to struggle. He was off the pace, towards the back. I think it just shows how difficult it is for these drivers. So fingers crossed he has a better weekend in Baku because he needs it.
He definitely has the potential. And LA, your assessment on Mick Schumacher's performance since Imola?
Yeah, I'm glad you said Imola, because who wants to say that full title of that full circuit race, because we'll be here till midnight. Well, obviously he did get the first 2 P16s in the first 2 races, P17 in Portugal, and he's now had 2 P18s, which is last today. Do you know what? He's with the Haas team, the Haas car. We know about the Haas car. We all know about that. And if he was in a better car, we know he would be higher up the grid, because look at him, he can drive. Yeah, all right, he had a bit of a mishap, but so did Charles Leclerc. Other drivers have had mishaps. Jacques Villeneuve's crashed, at Monaco. Michael Schumacher's crashed at Monaco. The greats, the wall of champions. Like the one at Canada. It's he's doing well. He's in that category. of drivers that crash at Monaco. So he's on the right page as far as I'm concerned. He's doing great.
He certainly is. And Jim, a quick word on Nikita Mazepin's progress in Formula One. He had a clean weekend in Monaco, which was, but yeah, good.
There's a pig flying just above your head, Fraser. I am not Nikita's biggest fan. I am devastated Ilott isn't racing this year, and I think he should have had the seat based off of last year. Mazepin's there again. We spoke about it briefly earlier. And in all fairness, he finished ahead of Schumacher at Monaco. I was looking, because there's little else to do outside of the pit stops, I was looking at the bottom of the timing screens and I saw Schumacher was losing something like 4 or 5 seconds across a lap, which is when Mazepin got past him. We never saw what actually happened. Maybe somebody who's got F1 TV Pro will share with that. But Schumacher completely outdid him at the hairpin on lap 1. Which is one of the few overtakes of the race. It was a great move, yeah. And I thought that was just Schumacher saying, you need to get out of the way so I can have a fun race here, mate, because he knows he's a quicker driver. The Haas is awful. You thought the Williams was bad over the last few years. Haas is making the Williams look particularly quick. It's such a bad car. We can't say for certain because there's no benchmark, there's no Grosjean, there's no Magnussen there to say, this is how we were last year, this is how we were this year. They've got 2 rookies, which is going to be a really difficult season, and they've set themselves up for that. They're all focused next year, and I don't think they're even developing the car after already, and we're in, May? So, yeah, they're going to have a tough old season, but Mazepin, the only benchmark we've got is against Schumacher, and despite the finishing positions today, Schumacher is completely outdoing him, and Schumacher's been in practice session after practice session at Monaco, and I still think he was actually quicker than Mazepin was. And how far Mazepin has been off of Schumacher's pace in those earlier rounds that you mentioned, it's not looking good for him. The guy's had a torrid off-season with a lot of hatred directed at him, and we don't need to go into that as off-track reasons. But all the guy needed to do is prove he deserves to be in Formula One, and thus far I haven't seen anything which says that he should be.
It's a difficult Haas car to drive, and next season is going to be the season for them to really prove themselves, I think. But unfortunately, that's all we got time for today. So Hannah, LA, Jim, thank you so much for your company on today's show, and thank you to you guys at home as well for joining us. If you want to get involved in the conversation, you can of course join our community on Discord. You can find the link to that via our website. If you have any questions, please get in contact with us via social media, and we'll try to answer them as much as we can. You can find the link to all of our social media channels by going to our website www.insidef2.com and by clicking the icons in the heading. Of course, if you enjoyed the show, please make sure you hit the subscribe button for more videos. We do only have a couple of weeks until Baku, so keep an eye out for our Baku preview, which will be out in just over a week's time. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.